Emma Norris is the Deputy Director of the Institute for Government. And that's the point about this, isn't it, Emma? This inquiry touches every part of government: health, education, you name it.
That's exactly right. I mean, I don't think we've seen a public inquiry before with this kind of scope. The pandemic affected, almost every person in the country. It affected almost every public institution in the country, lots of private institutions. And that means the sheer kind of scope and scale of the COVID inquiry is enormous, which is partly why we're seeing these arguments on, what should be revealed to the COVID inquiry? How much power should it have to look at people's private WhatsApps, for instance? Because it needs to look at such a broad range of information, given how many questions it has to answer and how wide it has to go.
Yeah, it's not things like sort of Leveson or Hutton as public inquiries go, because it was a particular thing about a decision to go to war or a phone hacking scandal. This is how government works. It's very DNA, isn't it?
Exactly. It's how central government works, which is the subject of this module. How did political decision-making function? How did advisors work with ministers? Where did power sit? As Jim mentioned, in Module 1, we were looking at how prepared we were as a country, but we're going to see future modules looking at the education system, the health system, health and social care. So we're going to see it going, very broadly all over the place.
And is it because it is so wide-ranging? People might say, what's the point of this? What will happen as a result? What powers does this inquiry have? It's such an unwieldy thing that it'll end up being impossible to really learn or implement things from.
Exactly. I mean, this is always a criticism of public inquiries, that we invest so much money, time, expertise, public emotional energy in inquiries. They're there to look at some of the, most kind of tragic situations that befall us. But often they don't lead to change. And that's hard even in some of the kind of smaller, more focused inquiries that you've mentioned. It's especially hard in an inquiry like the COVID inquiry that is going to last years because of how enormous it is. The sheer scale of what it's covering makes it difficult to have impact. I think there are, though, some things that should make us feel a bit more positive. I mean, it is likely to run for years and years, but the report's broken into modules. There are going to be interim reports from those modules. So we're going to probably hear the recommendations from the first module on how prepared we were next spring. This one, probably the most controversial module on how central government decision-making works, we'll probably see a report on that, perhaps not before the general election, but certainly by, say, early 2025. And so we're not going to have to wait as long as we sometimes do to hear what the inquiry
We'll get it in instalments.
Thinks.
Keep Jim busy. Just a quick thought about whether the WhatsApp has emerged as the key tool of ministerial communication. I just wonder, when all this stuff gets published, or some of it gets published, will this change the way government ministers communicate with each other? Is this the end of the WhatsApp era?
I don't think it'll be the end of the WhatsApp era, no. I think WhatsApp's become, a kind of an important tool in the way ministers, advisors communicate with each other. But I think it should change some of the way that government handles it. I mean, one of the big problems in this process has been that people have used private phones and private devices to have lots of these discussions about decision-making, about the use of evidence and so on. And so I think what makes sense is let's accept that WhatsApp is a tool that people are using, but let's have those conversations about work on government devices where the information is stored properly. If it needs to be drawn upon for an inquiry, it's all there in place and accessible, rather than these arguments about whether people have changed phones 4 times and they can no longer get the evidence. Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Emma, thank you. Emma Norris there, Deputy Director of the Institute for Government.